Hello, everyone, and welcome to another SEJ Marketing Think Tank webinar. Today, we're going to be joined by Nicole DeLeon from North Star Inbound, and she's going to be talking about how to create content that earns links. And then it's going to kind of base around a case study that she has that's really, really impressive. And I'm kind of excited about this presentation. Obviously, I get to see these presentations in advance. I think it's really good, and I think this is a topic that we really need to pay a lot of attention to. And Nicole's one of the few people out there, I think, that really gets link building. So my name is Brent Satoris. I'm moderating and rambling when possible. And I'll let Nicole, if you want to give us a little bit of an introduction about yourself, I'll jump into some housekeeping notes afterwards.
Sure. Hey guys, I'm Nicole DeLeon. I'm the owner and lead strategist at North Star Inbound. I love building links. I still get really excited when we build some really juicy links for our clients. I'm still involved in the day-to-day strategy for each and every one of our clients, and I am a recovering attorney. And with that, I'll kick it back over to Brent for a little bit of housekeeping before we get started.
Awesome. I always love that you say recovering attorney. My girlfriend's an attorney, so it always makes me laugh a little bit. During the webinar, if any of you have any questions, comments, concerns, there's a little box down in the bottom of your control panel where you can put questions in, and we will try to answer them later for Q&A, and we'll try to get you anything that you need. We have a number of polls throughout the presentation that I will jump in and ask. This is your opportunity to participate. We really appreciate you taking the time to participate. It helps Nicole kind of gear how she speaks to the rest of the slides. We'll do our best throughout the webinar to link any resources. So if Nicole mentions some tool or some, article, and we can grab the link and throw it in the chat, we will. If we miss something that you wish you had, please ask for it and we will get it to you. After the webinar is completely over, we are going to do a quick survey, about 5 minutes or less. It's really simple, but we do actually really take a lot of time to take that feedback, adjust how we manage webinars in the future. So please take the time to give us that feedback so we can continue to improve these month after month. Lastly, the entire webinar will be recorded and made available through a recap post on Search Engine Journal, typically within a day or two, maybe. So without any further delay, let's dive into learning about creating content that earns links.
All right, thanks, Brent. Okay, so what are we going to be covering today? So we are going to be running through a case study. We're really going to be leveraging that case study as an example to kind of teach you guys how to do this for yourselves. But in order to do that, we have to set up the problem and kind of look at the results that we got. And next, we're going to teach you how to get those results for yourself by first picking how to pick a linking audience, and I'm going to teach you all about what a linking audience is. Then how to create a linkable asset, because this is going to focus on content creation. And then how to leverage tangential content. We're going to tell you all about tangential content and why tangential content is nothing to be afraid of. Okay, so first, let's kind of set up the case study and the problem that the client came to us with. Again, not a traditional case study. I'm just setting the stage here, so bear with me a couple minutes while I talk about what the client was facing and the site and how they sort of came to us. And I promise we're going to focus on how you can replicate what we did to get these results for yourself. So the site was a regional real estate site. So it wasn't a national site, but it was a site very much like the Realtor.coms of the world, or the Zillows of the world, or the Trulia.coms of the world, right? They had a history of being impacted by Google algorithm updates, negatively impacted by Google algorithm updates. They had a history of manual link penalties, and they'd spent quite a bit of time trying to clean up all of these bad links that they had pointing at their sites, to the point where they really had no real link authority left at that point. And then they also focused a lot on making improvements to the quality of their content because they had been hit by Panda. And of course, you may or may not know that the Panda algorithm update hit sites that had sort of thin content or content on their site that really wasn't high quality. And so they spent a lot of time trying to get that all to be a little bit more robust so that they were a little bit more competitive with the content that they had on their site. And at that point, that's when they reached out to us and said, okay, we want to get serious about building quality white hat links to our site. How do we do it? So what we did is we wound up building about 14 pieces of content for them. And that got them about 1,800 links from unique referring domains. The average Moz domain authority for the geeks out there was about 28. So they had kind of a good range in domain authority from the backlinks that we earned. And the time frame was about 13 months. Okay, so you kind of get a sense of the activity. And what did they get for that, right? What they got was this amazing 316% traffic boost. And most of that traffic boost was actually going into their commercial pages. So that's really important. Most of that traffic wasn't going into the content pieces that we built for them. Most of it was going into the pages that had been optimized for all these pages that were focused on neighborhood homes for sale or homes for sale in neighborhood, whatever, right? Those are the pages that this particular site cared about. Those were the buyers, the eyeballs that were important for them, and that's where they saw the traffic boost. And as you can see more carefully, they started out, the engagement started, really it started a little before that, but the links didn't start to come in until December, because there's a small period of time where you start sort of running analysis and getting content out there, getting content posted, and started doing some prospecting and starting to run some outreach. So it takes a little while, right? Link building, links are sort of a trailing indicator of activity. So the links started to come in around December, and we saw a steady increase, and then they started to come off of what is sort of their high season, and we sort of saw a kind of a flattening out, which can happen even for any site that isn't dealing with a seasonal business. But this is very typical for a seasonal business. And then coming into the beginning of their next high season, boom, huge jump. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to show you how you can get these results for yourself. But first, we have our first poll.
Awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and read the poll for everybody. Again, if you can just take a moment and, answer the poll for us, it will help us out a lot. How are you scaling your link building efforts? We're looking to grow. That would be number one. I hope everybody's looking to grow. We're going to keep them the same. I've already influenced the answers, haven't I? And we got to cut back, which I don't think anyone ever said ever. So I'm going to give people just a little bit of a chance to continue collecting some responses. We have about 70% of the votes. And I'm going to go ahead and close the poll because I don't think it's going to, nothing's going to change this response now at this point. So as you see, 97% looking to grow. I think that kind of makes sense, but good to know.
All right, guys. So the first thing we're going to talk about is how do you pick a linking audience? But wait, why are we talking about audiences? I thought this was going to be about content. We're going to talk about content, I promise. But first, you have to figure out who you're building a piece of content for. It's super important. You know, if we're talking about link building campaigns, you don't want to be creating an awesome piece of content and aim it at an audience that's really only active on Facebook and Twitter. I mean, this isn't the beginning of the internet where there aren't any options for curating content. Nowadays, we've got a million different options for how we're going to share content with other members of our community, right? So you got to figure out if your audience is a linking audience. Most businesses define their audiences as buyers, right? So if I'm selling computers or if I'm selling skateboards, I think, well, obviously my audience is everyone who's buying a computer. Or if I'm selling some software, I may define my audience as, by use case, right? So marketing departments that are looking to solve problem X. And that's great. So the first thing you've got to do is figure out if your buyer persona is a linking persona. So going back to our case study, because we're going to use that throughout as an example, you'd go into Google. Google has all the answers. You go into Google and you put in the search phrase home buyers in URL links. Okay, So you're going to have to get familiar a little bit with some advanced search operators, and that's fine. And you can see right away at the top that there's over 17,000 results. But you're not done there, because that's a lot of results, right? So you might be thinking, hey, that's a linking persona. But wait, you have to drill down. So the first thing you got to do is start clicking, right? Who are these people, right? So first we see that we've got like a federal, like a title company, right? And then we have, it depends. It could be a competitor depending on if you're a national player, this is a competitor. If this is a real estate site that's in another region where you're not competing, this could be a link prospect. And then you have an inspector. So these are potentially good prospects, right? So these are maybes. Then you have to drill down and see, click through and check out, are they linking to outside resources? This is an example of a links page that would be awesome to get one of our clients on. The problem is that they're really not linking to any outside resources. All of these links on this page are internal resources that are proprietary to the University of Texas. So it's not going to help to reach to send them an email and tell them about our content. The next question you have to ask is, are these results that I'm looking at on Google, are they linking to branded resources? So going back to that Keller Williams example, if you click through, you would notice they're really not linking to any branded resources. They're linking to nonprofits. They're linking to government sites. If you run outreach to them, you'll find that that's an extremely common response to get back. So it's really not worth it to reach out to a whole bunch of people that aren't linking to branded content. So this is an example of a really good linking page, right? This is an EDU. This is a university student resources page. And they're linking to nonprofits, they're linking to government websites, and they're also linking to branded resources. Here you see like apartmentlist.com, and you see photo. We had a client that was in housing, we'd love to get them on this page, right? If we had a client that was in rehab, we'd love to get them on this page, right? Or if we had a client that was outside of those and we could create a piece of content that spoke to either of those two issues, we'd love to get them on this page. So after you've sort of done this, run through this process, and by the way, this is an eyeballing process. So because you're sort of in the ideation stage, you're not really, you're not getting a spreadsheet out at this stage and sort of making concrete tabulations of numbers at this stage. You're really just kind of taking a peek. Okay, you're doing your due diligence to figure out, are there some link opportunities here that are worthwhile? So once you've run through this, you got to figure out, are there some numbers here, right? Is it worth it for me to spend the time and the energy that it's going to take, because it's going to take a significant amount of time and energy to create a really good piece of content that I'm going to talk about in a minute. Because you're going to need thousands of link opportunities to land dozens of links, right? At the end of the day, no matter how great your content is, it's still a numbers game. You're not going to reach out to 100 people and get 100 links. That's just not the way it works, right? So that's the evaluative process that you're going to go through. So what if you run through that process and you realize that your buyer persona isn't a linking audience, right? And that's very, very possible. Sometimes you run through that process and you realize the only people that are linking are basically competitors of yours. And so it's probably not going to be a good idea to create content for just that buyer persona. So what you do at that point, I'm sorry, so backing up, the other issue that you might run into is your buyer persona may be a linking persona, but you may not have the numbers that you need. So if you're in a vertical where it looks like you're going to need, 5,000 referring domains, unique referring domains in order to be competitive. You're creating content that's directly related only to your buyer persona, and that's it, may not get you across the finish line. So anyway, what do you do if you need to go outside of your buyer persona? Well, you look for people with issues and problems related to what you do. So I'm going to show you how you can think outside the box. I'm going to give you a quick example in an unrelated space, and then I'm going to bring you right back to our case study. Okay. So what if you have a mattress store? Okay. What if you have a mattress store? So if you do mattress store in URL links, you might not find, you're going to find a whole bunch of just other mattress stores that are linking, and that may not be a good solution for you, right? So, well, what do all mattress stores deal with, right? They're trying to help people get a good night's sleep. So all of a sudden, if you shift it from your product to the problem that your product solves, and you do sleep in URL links, oh my gosh, 23,800 search results, and look at what is there, man. You've got the Sleep Health Foundation, right? You've got the University of Pittsburgh, right? You've got the Texas Pediatric Specialty and Family Sleep Center. My, oh my, what I love to have, I think I'm going to call all the mattress stores in my area right now and tell them about this opportunity. These are some, no kidding aside, these are some awesome, awesome links, right? You could create a resource for sleep and get away with promoting it to some links like these would be awesome. So bringing it back to the case study though. So what we did is we created a service member's guide to buying your first home, because we realized is that service members and veterans were a linking audience and they were an underserved audience. And so we wound up promoting it, yes, to home buyers, but also to service members and also to veterans. And for that particular piece of content, we wound up earning about 58 links. And so obviously this was one of the pieces that we ran with, along with the other pieces to get the result. Okay, now we're ready to talk about content. Thank goodness. Okay, so how do you create a linkable asset now that you know who you're going to be promoting it to, now that you have an audience in mind? We're going to talk about the long form resource guide. So I'm just going to introduce these concepts and then we're going to run through them in a little bit more detail. You have to provide enough information to completely solve the problem, and I'm going to show you how to do that. Better than anyone else. SEO is always a competitive thing, right? So you don't have to do it better than anyone will ever do it. You just have to do it better than anyone else is doing it today. You have to grab and keep the reader's attention, right? There's a linker out there that you've seen a lot of these resources. They're curators of content, so they're looking at a lot of these. So you have to grab their attention quickly and keep it. And then also, obviously, it's a resource guide. So you have to provide a lot of actionable information. So we're gonna take it slow. We're gonna go one at a time. Okay, provide enough information to solve the problem. I'm going to give you an example of a bad one. So here's a home buyer's guide. There were 5 steps on this page. It was 500 words. So buying a home is probably one of the most complicated processes that anybody will ever do in their life. We created a home buyer's guide. I looked at a ton of these home buyer's guide. It was amazing that some pages even had like 300 words. If you think about all the times that you've seen one of these, I'm sure most of you have seen one of these things. It's like a pamphlet with like 5 words on it, right? That's not a guide, people. So, you know, a guide to something that's very complex that is a multi-step process is long. So here's an example of a really, really good one. So this is on a very famous site. And so if you Google first time homebuyers guide, you're probably going to see an image very much like this because it ranks very highly, and it's no surprise because it's an awesome resource. This guide has 12 steps, and each step had around 600 words. So in total, this thing was 7,200 words. Obviously, if you put this in front of the right audience, people are going to want to link to it. Why? Because again, buying a house is a very big, complicated thing, and it's a very important thing. It's one of the most important things that some people will do in their entire lives. So it merits the length, right? And this one was really well broken down into 12 steps. The next one you want to think about is how to grab and keep attention. One of the ways that a lot of these guides kind of mess it up is they're presenting a lot of super dense information, and they don't bother to really break it up with a lot of, you know, there's not enough bullet points, there aren't enough checklists, there aren't enough spaces where people can sort of, you know, understand that these are steps that they need to take, numbering, that kind of thing. This is a really good example of how you can organize info into checklists in a way that's not obvious. So, you know, depending on what you're writing about, you may be able to organize your checklist in a different way. For the homebuyer's guide, it makes perfect sense to do it with time. So this is an example of one that started organizing the checklist with 12 months out, right? Perfect. So this is a really good example, and I think now it's time for our second poll. So I'm going to show you, on the other end of it though, I'm going to show you how you can expand your audience to reach even more people so you can get even more links.
Awesome. So we're going to launch our second poll. And again, I will give people an opportunity to review and answer. And we do request that you please take the time to review and answer. Are you interested in learning more about link building services from North Star Inbound, which is Nicole, who's speaking to you right now. So would you be interested in learning more about link building services? And I've got a number of questions already rolling in, kind of asking, you know, about budgets and about like scopes and stuff. So I think there's a lot of questions around like how to really accomplish this. And from my experience in trying to link build over the last decade, I don't try to do it. I find somebody who knows how to do it, just like creating content. I don't try to write my own content either when it comes to those initiatives. Just not strong in certain areas. Okay, so I think we have enough people voting. So I'm going to go ahead and close poll and show the results. Yes, maybe, and not at this time. So some people are learning and some people are interested, but I definitely think that there's a lot here to learn either way. So let's continue rolling.
Cool. All right, so writing tangential content. So the first thing I want to get you guys to understand is that tangential content is not a dirty word or a dirty concept. It's basically just anything that affects your buyer that's not directly about your product or service. So if you think about the real estate space, it's just basically content that's anything that's not directly related to buying a home. So obviously the first time home buyer's guide is not tangential content. It's directly related to buying a home, right? The first time seller's guide will also be directly about, you know, it's not tangential content. Pretty much anything outside of those types of items would be considered tangential content, but it doesn't mean that it's not relevant content. And it's important to understand how to create effective tangential content because it's one of the most effective ways to drive your link building process. So I'm going to show you some examples. And I'm going to totally abuse some of the most famous real estate sites out there because they go back to our case study. And also one of the reasons that I use the real estate case study is because I think everybody can sort of relate to case study. It's not an industry that is foreign to most people. So tangential content in the real estate industry is how to organize your home. Like anything about home organization is completely tangential to buying and selling a home. Boom, on Zillow. How do I prepare for the holidays? Super tangential, right? On Zillow. The best places to live in America's new tech hubs. Not about buying or selling a home. It's about where you living, and you know whether you know how different cities rank on Trulia's blog. Home safety is a really great topic for link building on the Zillow blog. Divorce, so anything that has to do with the different phases of your life, whether it's marriage, divorce, pregnancy, having kids, all of these things are tangential to buying a home, but you can well imagine that they are somewhat related to the buying cycle, right? If you get married, you might move into your partner's or your spouse's apartment or home, and then soon realize you're going to want to move out. If you start having kids, that may drive a move out decision, right? If you are aging and you can't make your home safe, you may consider moving. So these things are not irrelevant. That's why they're still tangential to what you do, and they're still important pieces of content to think about and develop as you engage with your audience. Tangential content broadens the reach of your campaigns, and it gives you access to new audiences, and it puts your brand in front of more people. So it's super important. So if you tie this concept back to looking at audiences and finding new audiences that are linking audiences, you marry those two concepts together. That's how we were able to put together all of these different pieces of content that together we were able to drive 1,800 unique referring domains in, it took many months, but it's a relatively short period of time for us to get that result. So the key takeaways here is, look, we had an awesome client who had a long-term commitment to link building, and that's really what you need. One success is not going to get you there, right? You can't expect to try this for yourself and get this right with one piece of content and expect to get you to the finish line and see the results that we saw. You're going to need a sustained effort with several pieces of content. And then don't forget, it's okay to focus on different parts of the buying cycle. Don't forget to explore different audiences, and go ahead and don't be afraid to write that tangential content, and you'll be able to get these results for yourself.
Awesome information, Nicole. Absolutely love it. I continuously always end up having discussions with people about link building today, and everybody wants to know kind of what's the current state, where's things at, what still works. And I think this really touches on, a couple of things that I think, are important. And that's that, I think everybody knows right now that, quality content is probably one of the most important things out there, along with some other aspects from SEO. But I mean, definitely, quality content. And this seems like it's really kind of, forward thinking, like answering the questions. And we also know that the buying cycle has significantly changed for people. So having content, even if you're using it from a link building standpoint, that kind of touches people along their path with the, how do you say that? Tangential. Yeah, I can't. Yeah, whatever. But it definitely that type of content really works well for along the process for people that are going down that path. I remember I started in assisted living, and people would always, we'd always explain, from a marketing standpoint, nobody goes to Google and says, I want to put my mom in a home. They say stuff like, I need to take my father's keys away, or I need to build a ramp in the garage. And those type of articles, not only help for the link building, but as you mentioned, they really do drive. They drive to, that kind of conversion, right? So we have a number of questions that have come in, and I'll just go ahead and dive right in. And is there any niche which is still not very popular and not many bloggers are there, but that niche can do wonders? Like any hidden gems, any hidden niches, can you tell us where that gold still lies?
Any hidden, like in terms of audiences?
Probably audiences or industries, like, oh, if you get into, chiropractic, there's still like a lot of success in this specific space.
Yeah, so I mean, our process really revolves around finding audiences. Pretty much anything that's been, so we look at problems, right? So the chiropractic, like anything that can be sort of commercialized has been commercialized at this point for the most part. But we found a lot of success, like the military audience is still sort of an underserved audience in terms of an audience that enjoys being focused on. They enjoy people creating content that's just for them, as opposed to having a section on on a general piece of content that just has like a section for the military. They really enjoy having content that's really focused on them. So I would definitely say any kind of military audience is one.
I think you kind of allude to an important point there, and that's that there's certain industries that are difficult to get in front of people. You know, if you're like, I want to write content about celebrities, you know, getting, you know, TMZ to link to your article when they have so much going on and they have such an interest in their own content, you know, you can find it a lot harder. Where military is, you know, people that are focused on military, you're still dealing with people, you know, directly, and you still have a line into them. So I think that's an interesting point to like really look at industries where, you know, the people running that industry are still sitting at home, or somebody that's approachable, somebody that's you know, you pick up a phone and call if you wanted to.
I wouldn't say that though, Brent, because like that, it's just a different process. So we talked about in this case study, we ran a certain strategy for this particular client. But we have digital PR strategies that we run to try to get in front of, the media. So like a TMZ or like a Huffington Post or an NBC, but it's a completely different process. And it is quite a bit more exacting. I mean, that is absolutely true. It is much harder to get in front of a reporter that is constantly getting pitched. And you definitely need something that is completely differentiated, original, and that they can't get anywhere else. But it's not impossible.
Do you recommend things like Haro, like help a reporter out, or setting up profiles, or joining like resource networks, you know, in the hopes that maybe you can pass along an article that you've created as within a quote, or, you know, get references back from quotes?
Yes, so that's definitely effective, and we're always we do that. We recommend that our clients do that for themselves. We don't find that that's the most scalable way to carry out outreach into the media.
Awesome. I'm an SEO agency. Should I write 50% non? I'm gonna struggle with this word. Tangential content and tangential, and 50% tangential. So 50% non-tangential, 50% tangential. If so, share this concept with other SEO agencies. That's an interesting way of phrasing it. Who should I share the content with to drive links to my SEO agency website?
Oh, okay. So they want to build up their own site. Okay, I gotcha. Yeah. So content strategy is sort of not like overall content strategy. So we develop content for link building, and that's really where we call ourselves experts. You do, however, have to have content that is optimized around your core keywords. Otherwise, you can have a ton of authority, but there's not going to be anything to sort of catch those core keywords. So you definitely have to have pages for the head keywords and for the long tail. You cannot be just creating tangential content that's optimized around nothing that anyone searching for your core services would be looking for. So for instance, you as an SEO agency, you might write something about how to conduct good outreach. That it's kind of unlikely that someone that's really, that's maybe instructive for someone that wants to learn a little bit more about email. It's a little bit more about email than it is really about SEO. You really want to, you want to have some of your core SEO terms or content marketing terms covered. You can't just write tangential content. 50-50, what's the breakdown? I would definitely make sure that you have most of your core terms covered before you go down the path of writing a whole bunch of tangential content to earn links. But that's tough, right? Because in SEO, you can do that, and that can all be built, and then you won't have any traffic because it's a really competitive area.
So somebody asked if they said that they're new to this and they want to clarify, are we talking about writing content to share with companies so that they'll link, back to us, like sharing the content we created to different companies so they'll link back to us? Is this the strategy, link earning?
Yes.
Yes, that is correct.
So back in the beginning of the presentation, when I was showing you those link prospects, you would then be collecting those URLs and finding contact information so that then you could go back once you have the content ready, you could go back and contact those people so that you could tell them about your content and that hopefully they would then link.
So there's a number of questions which come back to, I have a client, my business needs this. How do I convince people that this is valuable, right? I mean, this happens a lot. People are like, you're like, well, I created this content. What do you mean I need to get links, back? What's the phrases or the terminology or the way to describe links value so that you can explain it to a client, your boss, or whoever?
Okay, so the people that come to us usually like exhausted everything else. So link building is hard. It's also like the reason that people are asking these questions is because it's also hard to sort of tie the ROI to link building because you expend effort and then like a few weeks to months later you see results. So it's kind of really hard. It's not like on-page SEO or different things like that where you can kind of like make some adjustments and the results are kind of, you can see the impact a little bit more quickly. So by the time people come to us, they're sort of in a situation where they're like, so we've done all this other stuff and we're still being outranked. And so we're wondering if it has anything to do with links. And so what I usually do is I take them to Ahrefs. This goes back to the first webinar I did with you guys. I take them to Ahrefs and I ask them, either what are the keywords that you're being outranked for, or I just ask them like, who's beating you in search? And Ahrefs has a domain comparison tool. You go across the top. There's a drop down, and then domain comparison is one of them. And I put them in with their competitors, and then if you go all the way to the bottom, there's a backlink graph, so it shows not only where you are versus your competitors, but it shows that movement over time. And so you can literally see like, oh, hey, my competitors have 3 times the number of linking domains as we do. No wonder we have, our on page is airtight, but we're still like nowhere compared to them. Or you sometimes will see a situation where, we used to be ranking, but like here comes the startup out of nowhere with a link building strategy and has completely overtaken us. It's no coincidence that now, we're no longer outranking them and they're beating us cleanly. And so you can take that to a decision maker and show them basically on a graph like, hey, there's a pretty obvious correlation here between their results and our results and where they are with links and where we are with links. We really have to get serious about this.
And then from a total SEO 101, I mean, links are essentially a authoritative, element, right? So Google still ranks sites based on a number of different factors, but links pointing from quality sites to your site is one of the key factors of how Google determines whether your site ranks higher or lower, right? And so fundamentally, you want to have links to your site, and the question is, how do you go about building them?
Yeah, the base, I mean, people are smarter than me who are looking at the IP that Google is filing all the time to look to see what is it that the algorithm is actually based on, like what are they doing? And from the beginning, it has been links, and even though they've added stuff to it, the fundamental building blocks of the algorithm are still tied to that link. And even as recently, I think as 2016, there were representatives at Google that confirmed that quality content and links was basically the secret to ranking on Google.
Perfect. How do you go about pitching content that you won't be hosting on site. We often do that with Tangential content by simply sending the content itself or maybe an infographic. So I'm not reaching out saying I have an article on my site. I'm saying, more guest blogging, like outreach.
Yeah, so we don't do that. 100% of all of our strategies is leveraging content that we create for our clients, and we give that content to our clients to post on their site, and then we're reaching out. So, I mean, I wouldn't feel super like I've done that like as recently as 3 years ago. So I wouldn't feel super comfortable saying like, oh yeah, I know the latest and greatest information about that sort of outreach. Sorry.
Perfect. Yeah, and I mean, I think that there's a lot of articles out there as well on pitching for outreach. I mean, if you probably Googled a couple, I think there's some pretty good tactics out there that you can read about. Just do the filter on a Google search to be within the last year, and you'll get some relative content on that.
And that's why I don't want to steer you wrong, because nobody in the agency has done that really in the past, like Brent says, year. So I feel like other people would have better insights than I would for you.
Perfect. Let's see. I was looking for a link building service like yourself. What questions should I be asking? I remember this is a similar question to the last webinar we did. What kind of questions should people be asking you to determine if they're a good, well, first off, there's a webinar that was done here recently by Nicole.
And
really goes about.
We have a downloadable asset just for you.
Yeah, it's like, I would absolutely grab and watch that, because it literally is an entire presentation on how to find the right link building company.
No, but literally, if they go to SEJ, if they go to any SEO page, right? Because at the top they should have a how to hire a link building agency. It's being featured, right? So if
I believe so.
click through, they can download that. But I will answer your questions, sure. So you should ask for examples of the agency's work. You should ask them exactly, like they should kind of take you through their strategy, right? Like you should feel really comfortable that you understand almost backwards and forwards what they're going to be doing in order to get you the links. There are a variety of ways of getting links, and some of them are white hat, and some of them are gray hat, and some of them are still black hat. That a whole bunch of agencies are still doing, and you need to pick the way that's right for you. You need to feel that your agency is being transparent about what they're doing for you, because if they're not being transparent, or you kind of have like a weird feeling about whether or not they're being transparent, then you don't have the information that you need in order to make that decision about what's right for you. But yeah, there's like I don't know, I can't remember how many pages, but there's a whole bunch of questions at the end of it that you can like a checklist that you can have and ask as you evaluate a link building agency.
And just whoever asked that question, I mean, I know you have a lot of things in there, like what things to watch out. I linked it in the chat. I mean, the recap from the last webinar. So I definitely would suggest writing content on a PBN.
Okay.
Question mark. I'm guessing, is that a good idea? Not a good idea?
I mean,
what a PBN is.
That's not so PBN. So for those who don't know, PBN stands for Private Blog Network. And that means that somebody owns basically a lot of blogs that they then are essentially selling space on. And then they will give you a follow link for a certain price, right? So that's, and it is usually a lot more affordable to do this. The risks are that Google hates this, right? Because it's essentially paying for links. And so what they're trying to do all the time is find these PBNs, or private blog networks, and de-index them so that you don't get any value for that link. They can also, they find that sort of activity, I think that you might suffer some negative consequences to your site, or you're just essentially losing the value of your investment with that person. And it's very hard to tell whether or not like all of a sudden those links stop passing value. So in a way, you're sort of running on a treadmill, right? Like at first you might see like really great gains, and then all of a sudden you lose them and you're going back and forth, but you're never really building a house on a solid foundation. That's why it's not a service that we offer and not a service that we recommend.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen anybody really doing this in years, and the guys that I knew that were doing this 5, 6 years ago, I mean, nobody was talking about it, and you couldn't get into that if you wanted to. You had to know somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody, I mean, because nobody, as soon as one person gets in there and a site gets penalized, what was happening is people were turning around and saying, well, where did you buy links? And then they would tell everywhere they bought links, and they would, basically burn all these networks. So really, it's not a safe way at all to go, because once a company that's in that network gets in trouble for anything, they tell on the network, and then everybody that's in the network gets tanked. So just not a good way of going about it. Mm-hmm. Can you explain tangential again?
So it's tangential.
I'm never going to get that right, but.
So it's just anything that's not directly about your product, really. It's anything that affects your buyer in other stages of your cycle rather than the buy decision. And so again, just going back to the real estate example, it's so the first time home buyer's guide would not be tangential content. But how to keep a safe home or any variation of that type of content would be tangential content. How to organize your home, like organization tips, that would be tangential content. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes sense. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the things that are surrounding a topic, right? I looked up the definition real quick for everybody. Hardly touching a matter peripheral. So tangential. Somebody posted a comment for me, so I have a thing. We have about 58 more questions. What would be the average size of a hunting list when reaching out with a piece of content? Like, how many people should you reach out to? What's the size?
That's a good question. So it's also not a fair question, right? Because so like for us, we have a team. So it really depends on the size of your team. So we will reach out for like a big client. So to get these results, we will reach out until we run out of internet. So that can literally be tens of thousands of people for a single piece of content. No kidding. But that that doesn't mean that you have to do that if you're doing this on your own. So if you're putting in 10 to 20 hours for a single piece of content, I would try to reach out to 1,000 people. Start out with a couple hundred, send out your outreach, see how you're doing, see what the feedback is, maybe iterate on your content, that kind of thing. Especially as you get started, to try to get it right, and try to get the outreach right, try to get the content right, that sort of thing. But the great thing about these pieces of content, though, right, is that they're evergreen. So if you have a really large audience, you can kind of go, especially if you're a small company, one-man team, small agency, you can go back to these pieces of content for a really long time, right? You can 1 month scoop up a few hundred prospects, send out that outreach, put it away for a little while, take a breather. Next month, come back to it, look at the feedback, see the results, iterate a little bit more on the content, or hey, you got the content just right, go back, find some more prospects and do it again. That piece of content you can get miles and miles and miles out of. So, yeah.
Perfect. Pillar pages seems to be a buzzword right now. Can you explain what these are?
So gosh, I wish this was more of an interactive Q&A. Are you kind of talking about like Brian Dean talking about how you need like multiple pillars of skyscraper content? I'm assuming that's what the person is saying.
I would guess yes. I
Yeah.
don't know, but let's assume it is and answer it. And then if they have
Okay.
another
I'm
question, they'll
gonna
throw it in.
assume that that's what you're talking about. So I
Yes.
mean that's yes. Okay, good. So that's yeah. I mean absolutely. So the key takeaway at the end that I mentioned was you're not gonna get 316% lift from one of these pieces of content. You need multiple of these pieces of content, right? So I've seen people write posts on I tried the skyscraper technique and it didn't work. And then the comment comes back like, well, you need to try it more than once, right? You need to build authority. So each one of these pieces of content builds the authority of your site to a certain level. But then you need the next piece of content to get you the next rung up the ladder, and up you go until you get to the finish line, right? So yeah, I mean, absolutely. You need pillars, and sometimes you need lots of pillars.
This is a question that comes up a lot. How much can you automate your emails? You're going to send out 200 emails. You're going to do all these efforts. Should you be tailoring each email to kind of really, be completely unique, or can you find a way to have a template that you're adjusting enough? And what elements would you tailor that make an email feel personal?
So this varies a lot depending on the kind of content that you're promoting and depending on the industry that you're promoting to. So if you're promoting a piece of content to a TMZ reporter, I wouldn't send out, a template that's the same for everyone. I'd really try to make a personal connection. If you're sending out outreach to a bunch of like military blogs, you might like think about how much email you think that person is getting in a day. I think that's how you sort of can filter through the how much personalization. I would never not have any personalization, right? I would never have just like zero personalization. But there are, I think, ways that you can think about how you can make a personal connection with someone that will help you avoid deeply personalizing 100% of your outreach. So I think you might be able to think about. I keep going to the same examples, right? Because I think it's helpful to kind of dive deep. So if you were sending to a military audience and you had a member of your family or someone that was close to you that was a member of the military, like think about that person, right? Or think about like really like try to make a personal connection. Stop thinking about it as a link prospect and start thinking about it as a human being on the other side, and try to think about it that way, right? In that way, I think you can try to, make a personal connection without like reading everything that person has posted on their blog in order to deeply comment on everything that they've ever written or the last post or whatever, and engage with them on 50 different channels. Like you may have to do that for the TMZ reporter. You may not have to do that for the military blogger, right? You may just have to appeal to something that you both care about, right?
Absolutely. So let me think. I think we could probably get another two in maybe. There's a lot of questions about people asking whether this type of content is going to tangential content is going to, yeah, Luke helping me out in there. You know, is there a situation where it wouldn't benefit a company? There's so many questions in here that are like, I have this type of company, will it benefit me? And in my mind, I can't, it really comes back to really connecting with an audience, like connecting with your customer and providing value and talking about scenarios that are impacting your customer's life and their needs as a way of kind of connecting them to your product. always sounds like a good idea to me. I can't think of a scenario where you wouldn't want to do that, but I wanted to throw the question out to you and say, is there a scenario where you wouldn't create content like that?
Where you would not create tangential content. I have, I've certainly spoken to prospects that didn't feel that it was a good idea for them to do that. Because of where they were, because of their particularized goals and where they felt that they were in the life cycle of their company and the goals that they in particular had, like the strategies that they wanted to employ. But I don't think that it was a bad idea for them to focus on it. It just, they didn't feel that it was right for them at that time. So like for instance, if a startup that just had, $1 million in funding and was, had just barely figured out that their product was a product that people wanted, but had almost no customers, came to us and said, we have never worked with an SEO agency. We don't know if our site is sound from an SEO perspective. And we also don't have a PPC budget. We want to invest 100% of our marketing dollars purely into link building. And we think tangential content is a good idea. I would maybe say no. I would maybe say, you maybe should focus on, on-page SEO. Maybe you should spend some money on Facebook or AdWords to try to kind of get some customer traction first, and make sure that you have a foundation in on-page SEO, because you could build links until kingdom come, and they're not going to make a difference to you if the architecture of your site is
so it's not so much whether the content is good or bad for them, it's more along the lines of, is it the best use of time in the cycle of their business?
Exactly. I honestly can't think of a reason why it would always be a bad idea. It just might not be.
The only time that you have to be careful is when there are companies out there that have legal restrictions. So if you're in pharmaceutical, if you're in some of the spaces where you're not allowed to say certain things, then getting involved in some of those side conversations may, put you at some risk. But, if you're in those spaces, you really should be running everything by legal anyway, and you'll be able to figure out.
We've had clients that have been in highly regulated industries where everything had to be run by Google, and we can still run the strategy. It's just that there's certain, you got to say things a certain way.
Yep, exactly. Let me see if I can get one more question here. Do you normally have to pay companies to link to your content? Is it better to become a guest blogger content writer? I think I would say you're not paying at all for the link building. So I would say that, I'll let you answer that one, but.
Yeah, we don't offer any, remember, we don't offer to pay for links at all. And especially, you can even see in the links that come back. I mean, the universities aren't, accepting cash on the side in order to put the link up on their student resources page. They don't even understand what's going on in terms of paid links or anything like that. So, I mean, no.
Yeah, I don't think anybody should be spending money outwardly. I mean, there's just, there's always situations where you might have a relationship where you can kind of influence a link, I mean, I guess what they say is there's always a value, that you're providing somebody. And so there's always a sense of a cost, but going out and just looking at it as like, am I going to pay for the link? It's a failing strategy. It's a really bad idea in the space right now, in my opinion, at least. Last question. What do you think about no follow links? So you're going to build this link and somebody gives you a no follow link. Do you ask them to allow it to be to be followed? Do you leave it alone? And if you know a source is only going to provide no follow, is it even worth getting a link still?
So so no follow links are still, they still provide some value. We don't typically go after the no follow links. So no, we don't reach out to sites that no follow their links, but sites, they change their policies all the time. So sometimes Sometimes a link that we built today will get no follow tomorrow, and that's okay. You know, they still get the, you know, the brand's name out there. They still get there's still some value to the link. So we, you know, we don't worry about that. We definitely don't like show it to our clients and have a party because that's not what our clients are coming to us for. But we definitely do not reach back out and ask the person on the other side to follow the link. Most, you know, we're not having an SEO conversation in our outreach. We are having a value conversation in our outreach. We're talking about the value of the content that we're putting in front of the person. So we're not talking about links or follow or anchor text or anything like that.
Well, I think that's our time. We're kind of on the hour. I do want to thank you, Nicole, and everybody for attending. If you have, I mean, there's still a lot of questions in there that we weren't able to get to. So I highly recommend people, you know, go and ask Nicole these questions. You know, find her on Twitter, go to her site, you know, contact her and ask these questions because she's the source for these answers. So definitely kind of connect with her. 2 last-minute comments. Please, again, we're going to do a quick survey at the end. If you can just take a moment, help us with any answers and feedback. And don't miss our next webinar, which is coming April 26th with Bill and Motoko Hunt, 2 of the leading experts really in tactical international SEO. So highly suggest you take the time to visit that webinar as well. And thank you again, Nicole, for this wonderful presentation.